Hi, today we're going to take a look at two filters by Aurora Aperture. The first is a CPL or polarizer filter, and the second is a UV or protector filter. So let's take a look. Today we are going to take a quick look at two filters by Aurora Aperture. We have already tested their variable ND filter about a year or so ago, so if you have been watching, you should be familiar with the brand. The first is a UV filter, pretty straightforward 72mm called PowerUV Protector, and the second is a 77mm PowerCPL filter. Both can come in different threads ranging from 37 to 95mm. The CPL also has a 105mm version. Let's start with the UV protector filter first. If you're not shooting with an analog camera, you probably don't need an actual UV protection, as digital cameras are not affected by light in these wavelengths. So why would you put an extra piece of glass in front of your lens? The reason most people who do this will quote is to give you an extra protection layer for the front element against scratches or blows and let the relatively low-cost filter take the hit instead of the potentially expensive lens. We also want to add the fact that it is typically easier to clean, as you can remove the filter and easily clean it on both sides, but hey, maybe this is just our thing. There are people who don't follow this logic and prefer to go bare with their lens. If you are that type of person, just jump a bit forward in this review to the CPL part. However, if you are that type of person who is looking for some extra protection for your glass, we certainly are, the PowerUV protector seems like a very interesting option. On the Aurora Aperture website, you can find a lot of interesting information on the PowerUV protector. Maybe the most interesting part is that this filter uses Corning Gorilla Glass 3 technology, which is used in many smartphones to protect the glass from breaking and scratching. The company claims that in its test, the filter was able to withstand 50 inches or 1.2 meter drop of a metal ball weighing 56 grams, significantly more than other filters. Most good ones stopped at about 16 grams or so, according to the company. Aurora Aperture also ran a successful scratch test for 30 minutes trying to imitate keys, rocks, and other potential scratching hazards that can destroy your filter. Although we didn't run any sort of real-world crash and scratch test, anything that we would have done would not really be considered scientific anyway, and we only had a single filter which we didn't want to destroy by accident, we did want to try and see if the PowerUV protector influences the image quality in any meaningful way. For that purpose, we shot a color chart and our resolution test target. We shot these tests in the sun outdoors. This gives us a natural light, but the drawback is that the results are not always exposed exactly the same. Here you can see the comparison between our Nikon 105mm macro lens without any filter and with the PowerUV protector. We don't see any noticeable color shift with the PowerUV protector, although in our shots the PowerUV protector images seems to produce darker blacks. We also see no noticeable reduction in sharpness with this filter. If anything, the contrast seems just a tad better, really surprising. We compared this filter to our existing Hoya HMC UV filter, and again we were seeing no noticeable difference in terms of colors and sharpness between the two. Cpl filters are used to filter out polarized light, making skies bluer, vegetation color more saturated, and letting you shoot through water or glass without significant reflections, which are two things that you can't really replicate in post-processing, at least not easily. With the PowerCPL, we also wanted to test the performance, but not just that, but also see how it worked in polarizing light as you turn it around and give you some examples of possible uses. Let's start with performance. First, you need to realize that the PowerCPL will reduce the amount of light that reaches the sensor. In this case, it's just over one stop of light reduction, so you need to keep this in mind, and we compensated for that in our test. With that said, we see very minor change in some of the colors in our test chart, for example in the reds, but this might also be due to the exposure not being 100% identical. As for sharpness, if you magnify the image to about 400%, you do see some slight decrease in sharpness, but this is too much of a pixel peeping even for us, So for all intents and purposes, we would say that the sharpness of this CPL is very good. The most striking demo that we were able to record that can show the power of this CPL was removing the glare from a monitor. At least in our testing, the effects on the color vegetation were not very strong, and even water was not too affected by this CPL, although there are many factors here and you might see different results. So let's try and sum things up. The build quality of both filters seems good enough, and we had no problem attaching and detaching them, and the PowerCPL turns pretty smoothly. In terms of actual performance, the PowerUV didn't show any visible reduction in image quality in our testing, and even somehow improved the contrast by a tiny bit, and if we would believe Aurora Aperture claims, it should be significantly stronger than other protective filters, including the new Sigma Ceramic Protector and the Hoya HD Protector. The PowerCPL was mostly effective in our testing when we shot highly reflective surfaces such as LCDs, and less so when we tried shooting plants or water, but it doesn't seem to have any significant color cast and has very minimal loss of sharpness. Finally, in terms of pricing, these filters are not as expensive as the Sigma Ceramic Protector. For example, the Sigma 77mm filter costs just under $120, while the Aurora Aperture PowerUV costs just over $80. The CPL is a bit more expensive at $125 for the 77mm version, but if you look for example on the Hoya 77mm H3D CPL, you easily reach $200 price range, so the Aurora Aperture is certainly not the most expensive filter in this category as well. So this was our look at the Aurora Aperture PowerUV Protector and PowerCPL filters. You can read the full review on LensVid.com, where you can also find all of our test results. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next time.